Hello, good day everyone. So today we are going to discuss the rules of softball from 9 to 12. Since we're done discussing the rules of softball from 1 to 8, and now let's proceed to the rules of softball from 9 to 12. Yes, of course, I'm the presenter, Al-Jame Gumenggen. So the rule number 9 is the dead ball or ball in play. From the section number 1, the ball is dead. This means that the ball is dead and not in play in the following circumstances. A, first is when the ball is bat illegally. Number 2, when the batter steps from one box to another when the pitcher is only or the flex player only taking the signal or appears to be taken the signal from the pitcher's plate, or the SP only or the starter player steps on the pitching plate. When no pitch is declared, ibig sabihin, when the ball is bat legally. So kapag pinalo yung bola, nagkamali, hindi tinamaan pero lumabas or parang ganon, dead ball yung tinatawag. So kapag meron din yung sinabi, steps from the one box to another when the pitcher is taking the signal, yun, magkakaroon din doon ng dead ball. But no pitch is declared. When? Next is the section 2. The ball is in play. This means that the ball is in play in the following circumstances. Ito yung mga nangyayari. So first, at the start of the game, in each half inning, when the pitcher has the ball while standing in his pitching position and the plate umpire has called play ball. And now let's proceed to the section number 3. This means that delayed dead ball. There are 5 situations when a violation of the rule occurs. An umpire recognizes it and ball remains live until the conclusion of the play. These situations are: first is an illegal pitch, second is the catcher's obstruction, and the third is FP only or plate umpire interference. The last is the obstruction. Yes, we also have the detached equipment contacting a thrown ball, a pitch ball, or fair bat ball. So, since we're done discussing the rule number 9, so let's proceed to the rule number 10, the umpire. Section number 1, protests that will not be received. This means that protests shall not be received or considered if they are based solely on a decisions involving the accuracy of judgment on the part of an umpire, or if the team lodging the protest won the game. Examples of protests that will not be considered are, so ito yung mga halimbawa. First is whether a bat ball was fair or foul. You also have whether a runner was safe or out. Last is whether a pitch ball was a strike or a ball. So that is the section 1, protests that will not be received. Second is the section 2, protests that will be received. Ito yung mga natatanggap. Protests that shall be received and considered include matters of the following types. First is the misinterpretation of playing rule. Yan, kapag nagkakamali tayo sa pag-intindi ng playing rule. We also have the failure of an umpire to apply the correct rule to a given situation. We also have the failure to impose the correct penalty for a given violation. But take note that the protest for the above must be made before the next pitch or before all infielders have left fair territory, or if won the last play of the game before the umpires leave the playing field. Ibig sabihin, kung anong pa na yung umpire, so yun matatanggap yung protest or before the next pitch. O bago yung next pitch, so kailangan nakapag-protest ka na para matanggap or ma-recognize kung ano yung protest mo. So that is the section 2, protest that will be received. In section number 3, protest involving judgment and interpretation of rule. This means that the protest may involve both a matter of judgment and interpretations of a rule. An example of situation of this type follows. Yun, with 1 out and the runners on second and third bases, the batter flied out, the runner on third tagged up after the catch, the player on second did not. In section number 4, notification of intent to lodge protest. The notification of intent to protest must be made immediately before the next pitch. Na nga. So, exemption, player ineligibility. So, first, the manager or acting manager of the protesting team shall immediately notify the plate umpire that the game is being continued under protest. The plate umpire shall in turn notify the opposing manager and official scorekeeper. That is the section number 4, notification of intent to lodge protest. In section number 5, time to launch an official protest. This means that the official written protest must be filed within a reasonable time. First, we have this statement: in the absence or the reasonable time. These are in the absence of league or tournament rule fixing the time limit for filing a protest should be considered or if filed within a reasonable time, depending upon the nature of the case and the difficulty of obtaining the information on which to base the protest. Kung ano ang pagbabasihan nila. So next, within 48 hours after the scheduled time of the contest, it's generally considered a reasonable time. So that is the section number 5, time to lodge an official protest. In section number 6, information required for written protest. The formal written protest should contain the following information. These are the date, time, and place of the game. You also have the names of the umpires and scorers. So, syempre, ito yung kinakailangan natin. Next is the section 7, result on protest. The decision made and protested, game must result in one of the following. So these are: the protest is found invalid and the game score stands as played. Next, when a protest is allowed for misinterpretation of a playing rule, the game is replayed from the point at which the incorrect decision was made to the decision corrected. Yun na nga, ginagamitan nila ng replay kung saan is meron silang misinterpretation of playing rule, may natawag na mali, or kaya i-review nila kung saan ba yung incorrect decision na nangyari. So that is the section number 7, result of protest. So since we're done discussing the rule number 9 and 10, so let's proceed to the rule number 11, the protests. First is the section 1, protests that will not be received. Protests shall not be received or considered if they are based solely on a decision involving the accuracy of judgment on the part of an umpire, or if the team lodging the protest won the game. Examples of the protest that will not be considered are: A. Whether or bat was fair or foul, whether a runner was safe or out. So that is the section number 1 from the rule number 11, the protest that will not be received. So section number 2, protest that will not be received, is shall be not received or considered includes the matters of the following types: the misinterpretation of playing rule, the failure of an umpire to apply the correct rule to a given situation. In Section 3, protest involving judgment and interpretation of rule. Protest may involve both a matter of judgment and interpretations of a rule. An example of situation of this type follows. With one out and the runners on second and third bases, the batter flied out. The runner on third tagged up after the catch. The player on second did not. That is from the section number 3, protest involving judgment and interpretation of rule. In section number 4, notification of intent to lodge protest. The notification of intent to protest must be made immediately before the next pitch. Exams, player ineligibility, the manager or acting manager of the protesting team shall immediately notify the plate umpire that the game is being continued under protest. The plate umpire shall in turn notify the opposing manager and official scorekeeper. So next is the section number 5, the time to lodge an official protest. This means that the official written protest must be filed within a reasonable time. In the absence of the league or a tournament rule fixing the time limit or filing a protest should be considered if filed within a reasonable time, depending upon the nature of the case and the difficulty for obtaining the information on which to base the protest. So, within 48 hours after the scheduled time of the contest is generally considered a reasonable time. So that is the section number 5, time to lodge an official protest. Next is the section number 6, information required for written protest. These are the date, time, and place of the game. Ito yung mga importante. So we also have the names of the umpires and the scorers. However, in section number 7, results of protest, ito yung mga resulta. The decision made on a protested game must result in one of the following. A. The protest is found invalid and the game score stands as played. B. When a protest is allowed for a misinterpretation of playing rule, the game is replayed from the point at which the incorrect decision was made with the decision corrected. So kapag may incorrect decision, so yun lang po yung nire-replay nila sa situation na yun, kung saan hahanapin nila kung may malibang tawag or may pagkakamali bang mga nangyari na napagdesisyonan ng umpire. So that is the result of protest. So in the section 7, results of protest. So since we're done discussing the rule number 9, 10, and 11, so let's proceed to the rule number 12 of scoring. In section number 1, the official scorer shall keep records of each game as outlined in the following rules. It also that shall have the sole authority to make all decisions involving judgment. For example, it is scorer's responsibility to determine whether a batter's advance to first base is the result of a hit or an error. However, a scorer shall not make a decision which conflicts with the official playing rules or with an umpire's decision. That is the section 1, the official scorer, from rule number 12, scoring. In section number 2, the box score. Each player's name and the position or position to be played shall be listed in the order in which he bat or would have bat unless the player is legally substituted, ejected, or removed from the game or the game ends before his turn at bat. Yun na nga. Section number 2, the back score. Now let's proceed to section number 3. Base hit shall not be recorded. A base hit shall not be scored in the following cases. Kapag ito yung mangyayari, when a runner is forced out by a bat ball or would have been forced out except for fielding error. In section number 4, sacrifice fly balls. Is this a sacrifice fly is scored when with less than 2 outs. This A. The batter scores a runners with a fly ball which is cuffed, or the ball or the line drive handled by an outfielder or an infielder running in the outfield is dropped and a runner scores, and in the scorer's judgment, the runners could have scored after the catch had the fly ball been cuffed. In section number 5, runs bath in rule number 12 scoring, a run bath in is run scored because of one of the following reasons. Maybe a safe hit or a sacrifice bunt or slap hit from the flex player only, or sacrifice fly. In section number 6, pitcher credited with a win. A pitcher shall be credited with a win in the following situations. A. Maybe this is the reason when he is the starting pitcher and has pitched at least 4 innings and his team was not only in the lead when he replaced but remains in the lead for the remainder of the game. This is the section number 6, pitcher credited with a win, coming from the rule number 12. In section number 7, pitcher charged with a loss. A pitcher shall be charged with a loss regardless of the number of innings he has pitched if he replaces when his team is behind in the score and his team thereafter fails to tie the score or gain the lead. That is the section number 7, pitcher charged with a loss, coming from the rule number 12. In section number 8, the game summary. The game summary shall list the following items in this order. Maybe the score by innings and the final score, the runs bathed in and by whom hit. So that is the game summary. Kapag the final score, kung sino yung nanalo, and run bathed in the by whom hit. Yan sa mga score ng mga players, pag game summary, the highlight. Summary ng mga laro. So that is the section number 8. Coming from the rule number 12, the game summary. Next is the section number 9, stolen bases. This means that are credited to a runner winner whenever he advances on a base unaided by a hit, a put out, an error, a force out, a fielder's choice, a baseball, a wild pitch, or an illegal pitch. In section number 10, records of forfeited games. This means that all records of a forfeited game shall be included in the official records, except that of the pitcher's won-loss record. So that is the section number 10, records of forfeited games, coming from the rule number 12, scoring. So that's the end of our discussion in rules of softball from 9 to 12. So that is the rules of softball. So I hope you have a lot of understanding, may natutunan kayo sa ating discussion about sa rules of softball, and I hope na meron tayong madadala in future generation, meron tayong naiintindihan, meron tayong magagamit kapag when it comes in playing softball, na alam na natin yung mga rules na gagamitin, kung ano yung mga violations, kung ano yung mga equipments, ano yung mga rules, ano yung mga dapat. So I hope may mga natutunan kayo. So that's the end of our discussion. So once again, I'm Al-Jame Gumenggen.